Hey everyone, thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Women of DevOps. And today we're joined by Anna Medina, and she is a senior chaos engineer at Gremlin. So hello, Anna. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. A little bit about myself. I currently reside in San Francisco, California. I've been in California for 6 years now. Go West Coast. I am originally from Costa Rica and Nicaragua. I got my upbringing there. My parents are from Nicaragua, and then we transitioned to Miami, Florida. And in Miami, Florida, it was all sorts of things that you can think of with Miami. But for me, Miami was a really big stepping stone because that is where I got a chance to fall in love with technology. So got a chance to learn how to code in middle school, took a class for introduction to computers and got started with Microsoft Publisher. So I got to see the insert HTML button here, and then I went on Alta Vista. That was a search engine at the time, and I was like, what is HTML? Hypertext markup language. Ooh, what does this do? So that was my first kind of like diving into what could code be. And around that time, there was also sites like MySpace. So then I could go and play with cascading style sheets known as CSS. So now all of a sudden, I'm like taking a deep dive in these two things to make websites. I hadn't made the connection that if you put those two together in an HTML and CSS file, you've got a website. So a year into this, I start realizing that you can put things on the web and make things pretty and get paid for it. So my family was going through some financial hardships, and that kind of like drew me to launch a business. I got a chance to launch a freelance business where I offered web design services, digital design, motion graphics, and filming and photography. So kind of got a chance to package up some of my hobbies and things that were going to make money during that time without knowing where that path was going to lead. Um, and that kind of got the ball rolling. I then got a chance to continue these passions, went to a high school focused on information technology, got a chance to go to college and study computer science and get a few internships that later led for me to be like, all right, I like coding. Let's make this a career. And then I came out to California for University of California, Santa Cruz to finish my bachelor's degree in computer science. And in that process, I was like, nope, I hate college. I'm going to become a college dropout. I just don't do traditional school because I am a self-taught learner. I had learned how to code on my own. And when I was in college and those classes, the way the professors were teaching data structures and algorithms and Java, it just didn't click for me. And I also had a hard time where I look in the room and not only am I starting again from the beginning of a lot of these courses for computer science, the credits didn't transfer. I look around and it's a white male room. And yeah, there are a few females. I will say they did have some, but I never got a chance to find a community. And then that allowed for me to continue not being able to ask questions, ask for help. So in moments where I was struggling in these classes, I had no one to go to. So it continued making it really hard to be a woman in the tech space and continue learning in it, where I was like, well, I can do this on my own. In online communities, I can find help. So everything kind of worked out. I left school and I then continued on with my internships. And that later led for me to be out here in California for the last 6 years.
Very nice. How old were you when you had started your business?
I was 15 years old when I launched my freelance business. It feels surreal. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a formal like LLC. My dad was an entrepreneur, and somehow he didn't guide me on those steps. It was just very much of like, yep, Anna's doing web design, photography, have her contact info, here's a check. All right, cool. Like, let's get this going. Yeah, didn't really have those business steps to be able to get guided on how to do freelance properly. And I mean, I was a student, so it wasn't a full-time career, but it was taking up around 20, 30 hours of my week. So I did have like a big chunk of time missing where I was doing a lot of work in high school, like those first 2 years of high school, and that's mostly when I did my work. I was also wild enough to graduate high school early. So my senior year and my junior year, I did them together. And that meant that my freelance business didn't have as much action. But I think I did one project for a company out here in California, and it was a lot. I had a lot on my plate, small social life. Somehow still had a relationship around that time, but yes, really young.
That is awesome. To go back to your career a little bit, for those who are unfamiliar with chaos engineering, can you give us like the 10,000-foot overview of what that entails?
Yes. I've been working in the field of chaos engineering for the last 5 years. It's been a space that has been growing over time. The topic around chaos engineering is that you're injecting failure into your system, your application, your code, and you're trying to find out what those breaking points are. You're hoping to learn from these failures in order for you to take those learnings and make your systems and applications more reliable. So how can I find those breaking points before they break in front of a customer, they break in production, they break when we're launching something new? So that is like the big overview. And when I was working at Uber, that was a project that I got hired in to do. Uber was very much of like, we need to be reliable at all times. We're a global company. And their big goal was that they were going to run with 5 nines of reliability. So they're reaching for one of those hard to reach reliability goals. And that meant that they're growing their site reliability engineering team. At that time, there was around 150 SREs. They were starting to bring in the model coming in from a lot of the folks that are joining Uber from Google. And we start going in and coming in as site reliability engineers embedded in critical services. So these site reliability engineers would fit with what's considered like that marketplace type of critical services that Uber was having, those services that were tying in a user to a driver to a user, the routes, the payments, all of these services that need to happen in the back end. So as my team is doing a lot of stuff on that, there was other teams that had to work on making monitoring better, making failure injection happen for all these services, load generators, making sure that we're ready for those really big traffic dates that for Uber, they're considered Halloween and New Year's. Days that in the United States are known as the years that you go out drinking with your family, your friends, you don't want to be on the road. So those years, they had a lot of failures leading up to them. So when I was there, it was one of those big goals, like, how is it that we can make sure we don't relive the failures that we have had in the past where it was like surge pricing, or we didn't have enough capacity, or site was having a lot of latency. So the engineers that were working on these critical services were empowered to run chaos engineering experiments of what happens if we lose one of the servers within our infrastructure, if we lose access to one of the ports, there's latency calling into the database. And at the same time, how do you prepare for that 3-4 months ahead of time? So within capacity planning, site reliability engineer capacity, they were running experiments on failure and at the same time replicating how many users were on the application the prior Halloween. So let's go ahead and put all that load, inject failure, and then have these engineers also try to fail over to another data center. So literally replicating everything that could go wrong so that if things went wrong, someone was ready to take action and Uber wasn't going to be down for this length of time. So it was like really, really amazing to see all this stuff and be able to participate in helping grow that type of practice within the organization. And later transition to working at a company, small startup that was getting started and building a chaos engineering platform. How is it that we can help organizations be better about reliability without having to spend 6 engineers to build their own internal tooling? So the last 3 years I've been in Gremlin, we've been growing the community around chaos engineering, a lot of education, a lot of helping our customers define site reliability engineering fundamentals within an organization, change the culture around failure, and then sit down with them. And it's like, let's look at those incidents. What can you actually take from those learnings that you already paid a lot of money for? And make sure that you are reliable for these failures to happen again. And a lot of the work with our customers looks very different. Some of them is really like, let's get started on doing our first experiment. How can I break that failure into a hypothesis, into a failure that I can inject? What do I observe? What are those conditions that would say, no, I need to stop this experiment, it's not going well? And then some of the other work with other customers is really more advanced. How can I bring my chaos engineering experiments to my CI/CD pipeline so I make sure I'm not regressing into past failures? So goes back into the shift left mindset. Let's bring failure injection closer to the developer. So as a developer, so checking in their code to their repos, you know that they're checking into development. You can run a chaos engineering test. Then that can get promoted to staging accordingly. You can do blue-green deployments, or you can roll out to production. Like as you roll out to production, do more chaos engineering experiments. And like a lot of this work is really cool because it takes very different implementations. So you do kind of become a consultant and embedded in various organizations. And all of a sudden you get all these little learnings and tidbits from so many big organizations that are running at scale right now.
That's really cool. I'm going to come back to Gremlin, but you brought up Uber, and I really want to talk about Uber.
I'm giving you all sorts of tidbits to jump around as you need.
Yes. Well, okay, so let's talk candidly about your time at Uber. We had talked briefly about a lawsuit, so I'd like to hear about that.
I joined Uber as Uber's first site reliability engineering intern. So this was part of the organization within infrastructure that they're trying to grow. As I mentioned, I was the first SRE intern within chaos engineering, and it was all sorts of interesting. I was on call my third week at the organization, which seems really wild for an intern. And this is the critical services on-call kind of team. So I get put as secondary for the chaos engineering platform. I'm secondary also for the infrastructure rotation, which is the largest rotation with 40 services for Uber's critical services. But that was a type of ability that you had joining a team like this. And it was a really interesting experience for me because prior to that, I had been a developer. I had been the developer that says, it works on my machine, throw it over the wall, it's ops problem now. So now all of a sudden, I am a software engineer working on ops that has to understand systems and reliability. So I had to all of a sudden take a deep dive in all of that, sit down with a lot of the senior engineers, look at architecture diagrams, understand Linux, and take a deep dive on all these commands for debugging and getting more information about hosts. Like it was a really fun time, and I had to learn a lot really, really quick. But that was a lot going on where when you look back, it's like putting in a young intern coming into an organization through a lot of that learning doesn't seem healthy. So that was already really hard. And as all of this was going on, there was a lot of hiccups going on within the organization where you heard a lot about sexual harassment, you saw it, things were getting reported. I started like losing sight of a lot of the people that I work with that were close to me. They were reporting things to management, things weren't going well. So all of a sudden they weren't working at the office or they were taking time off. Some of them were leaving for family reasons. So things got really hard. Things got harder for me where I was one of the only like females within the organization. And I would try to bring my whole self to work. Prior to that, I'm coming in from Miami. And I would show up to work like dressed in professional clothes with my makeup on. And that would lead to a lot more sexual harassment. So that things kind of started changing where I was like, all right, I got to be one of the guys, wear hoodies, wear jeans, hair up, like we're just going to bro out. And then that things got easier for me where I would get to hang out with a lot more of those senior engineers and continue learning a lot. And at the same time, that meant that I was exposed to a different type of culture where it was more of a drinking culture, it was more of a party culture. That was part of like the culture you had to be in to get along with these type of guys that were running in the organization and the leaders of the organization. So there was no other way. If you wanted to be successful, you wanted to continue going up within your career there. I had gotten converted from intern to full-time within my first 2 months at the organization. I had done a lot of work within on-call and helping other services and just holding the fort as a lot of my team was not around. So that was really amazing to see because it meant, okay, they care about my career growth. This is really hard for me. Yes, I wish I could easily quit, but it was a high-paying job. Like getting another high-paying job in Silicon Valley for a Miami girl, Latina girl, was kind of like hard to even think about. As much as I like knew I could rely on a lot of people in Silicon Valley, so I just kind of suck it up. I was like, this is Uber. This is going to be $1 billion company. You show up, you do your work, you continue growing as an engineer, you're going to make it. So kind of kept my head down. Things kept on happening within HR. I had become close friends with Susan Fowler at that time. So I was kind of really aware of what was going on with the type of stuff that happened to her and her management chain. So a lot of stuff, like I kind of kept reiterating to leadership and at the same time kind of shared where I was like, oh, I'm getting these messages or these type of people are positioning themselves as senior leaders in my organizations, but they're being bad actors. And then they sexually harass me. So how can I report them to HR when they're portion of my performance review? And then a lot of stuff happened, changed teams, had sexist managers, had a lot of stuff reported to HR that just wasn't taken a look at or things were handled. And you kind of know what it meant when things were handled. And all of this just kept getting like bubbling up. And then February 2017 happened, which it was just rough. Like February 17, I still remember where it's like Susan Fowler's blog post comes up. And all of a sudden, like things just like light up on extra fire. I was completely supporting of this blog post coming out because it's transparency. It's that where people need to speak their truth. And this culture was really, really bad. So finally, someone shining a light, being the whistleblower, needed to be said. And it sucked because a lot of other stories had happened within the organization, and those didn't matter at this point, and they stopped mattering after that. So it became hard for a lot of folks after that moment. It's like a turning point for a lot of Uber engineers. And that kind of is where like things just got wild. I ended up contacting lawyers that week where I was like, oh, reporters and recruiters and like a lot of people are coming into my messages and there's private investigators snooping around, like whether it was specifically on Susan Fowler's life or around what was going on within Uber engineering culture. Uber hires Eric Holder, things are going to go down. So wild things just kind of started happening, and those that were close to the stuff that was going on legally started getting like weird creepiness things happen around them where you're like, there's a chance there's private investigators, there's chances that people are following us, like there's chances that things are missing from our computer. So things start just going downhill. So I stayed working within the organization. I changed teams once again. And as all of this was going on, I sent a letter to over 600 people within the organization where it was my time to share my story, where it's like, I am also another engineer within site reliability engineering who's going through a tough time. I am a Hispanic female. You're about to see me walk away from this company, from this organization. I've tried fighting. I've tried asking for change. It's not happening. And part of those 600 people included the CEO, the CTO, the board of directors. Like, we didn't care. We wanted to hold the company accountable we wanted to shine light of, there are more stories like Susan Fowler's blog post on here. And it's time to do the right thing. It's time to not quiet down. Let's use this moment to create a better culture, to let people speak up about what happened and make things better. So within that was a lot of requests to leadership. There was a lot of, we have said publicly that we are going to make this better, but I am here internally and we're not doing this work. Like there's a disconnect. So all this keeps happening. All those months continue just being really, really hard, where I keep asking leadership, like, what's going on here? Why are we lying about this? How is it that you can say this? All of these are like emails that are going in. Some of them I'm telling my manager, my new manager, hey, I am sending an email to the CEO and the CTO, and I'm taking off early. Thank you. Goodbye. And then he's like, no, you can't just do that. So he tried to be as supportive as he could. It just was in a rough situation. And then it got to the point that the project that I was now on was a big launch that was coming into the Uber application, working with a few partners, like partner engineering, developer advocacy, and just QA testing in a way as well with our mobile engineers. Really, really cool project. But all of a sudden, I'm working 60 hours, leaving the office at 11, 1 in the morning to have things ready for the next day. At this whole time, like, I am 100% still here for this organization. I want to make things better. I love the work that I'm doing, and I want to stay here. So the press is on here, the investigators, the reporters, the recruiters, all of these is blowing up, and I'm still trying to be like, no, I'm staying at this organization. Don't tell me anything. And I continue asking things from leadership, and I kept asking whether it was like, there's so many people here who are devoting their life to be engineers, to be employees here, and you're not caring about us. Like, this hurts. Like, we're constantly in your face in your listening sessions, and you can just sit next to us and make a joke out of it. Say that things are getting handled within HR, but you're not seeing what the damage is. So I completely burnt out. I had lost 35 pounds within 6 months. I was just completely unhappy. I was not talking to family or friends. There was a lot of substance abuse going on. And like, yeah, it was like, I couldn't keep food down. Like, I just kept throwing up. I had these headaches. I kept going to the doctors. They couldn't figure out what was going on. So I tried going on medical leave. Things did not get approved. So I just continued showing up to work, and things got worse, where HR wasn't doing the right things, and the emails they were sending out were a lot more triggering. So I ended up in a really bad, depressed state, walking into the emergency room of a hospital, checking in myself for suicide prevention. So that was my first hospital stay, where it was like, I'm completely burnt out. This is going on. I need help. And yeah, I went on medical leave, and when I was in medical leave is when everything kind of settled in of, you're not supposed to be a martyr. Like, you have a lot more to give to this world. So like, what can you do in this moment where you're trying to make things better, but you can't? Like, you don't have the power, you don't have the political capital, you don't have a C-level type of job. So that's when it was like, all right, hey friends, like, we've all gone through the ringer in this organization. Like, what can we do? By that moment, there was a lot of like friendship that was getting formed within the friends that were within site reliability engineering and infrastructure, that it was like sharing about pay. How much did we come in at? How much were our friends making? How much equity do we have? Who has reported things to HR? So all of a sudden, we have 3 Latina engineers that are willing to sign on with lawyers and bring a class action lawsuit together. So those 3 Latina engineers, it was myself, Roxana del Toro, and Ingrid Avendaño, where we're like, no, this ends here. Like, this company needs to be held accountable. So we ended up talking to lawyers, and we went through this entire process of doing a lawsuit against them for gender and racial discrimination on equal pay. This lawsuit took a long while to get through the end of the cycle, but we ended up settling for $10 million for a class of 488 engineers. Those engineers identify as women engineers or people of color engineers. That class would include Latinx, Hispanic, Black engineers, Native American, or mixed race. So those people were going to get a subset of the lawsuit money. Then from that same class, they were allowed to submit more paperwork to get access to some of the money, another bucket of that lawsuit that was around sexual harassment, around a toxic work culture. Like, if you're able to prove your claims within our class, you are going to get allocated more money than just your equal pay portion of it. So even putting together my own set of documentation for my own portion of the lawsuit, as I had already done all this work, it was really hard, really triggering. And the thing that was harder was that throughout all this, I was still going through a mental health journey where I ended up hospitalized 2 times. I did a partial hospitalization program on top of that. I went to rehab residential center for a full month with like no access to like my laptop or cell phone. So it was like really, really hard, and try to like keep my best foot forward, knowing that I was doing the right thing and I was going to be proud of myself later on, where it's like, you're going with your gut, you're standing for your values, and it doesn't matter what everyone else is saying. And yeah, I filled out some of the paperwork for our lawyers within my stay at the residential center. So it's like, hey, program, I'm supposed to be in here for 3 months. I need my laptop because my lawyers need for me to sign some documents. So they would be willing to make some concessions, and like my therapist would sit next to me as I work on my phone to talk to my lawyers. It all feels like a soap opera type of TV show when I look back at it. But I got discharged from my stay at the program because of the lawsuit. So I needed to be in San Francisco to meet with Uber's lawyers to go over paperwork and do closed door mediation, with the plans that I was going to go back to my program to finish off everything. But things got complicated there too. Yeah, I came out to San Francisco, did that in January 2018, and more paperwork got signed, and I believe the judge in Oakland got to sign the paperwork in November to approve everything with the lawsuit. So checks went out December 2018, and yeah, it was very much of like a big chapter ended. At that moment, we were finishing the lawsuit with just Roxana and I being the named plaintiffs of the lawsuit. I still remember being in that room for 8 hours with her and trying to use coloring books to distract ourselves, where it's just like the last few years just felt so surreal at that moment. But yeah, no, looking back at it, I still stand by my choice. I still feel really proud that I was able to hold such a large corporation accountable for something that they did that was so wrong to so many minority engineers. And at the same time, one of the things that Roxana and I really wanted was that we made a statement to technology companies, like, you're not allowed to underpay us, no matter what type of organization you are. We're here. We might not look like the majority of your organizations, but it's not fair to get just a percentage of our equity or just a percentage of our pay because we didn't go to MIT or Stanford, or we're not white and male. Like, it's just not okay.
Absolutely. Holy crap, man. You are brave.
Yeah, I told you, I was like, I am candid as hell, and a lot has happened.
How long did it all take in total from like publishing of the blog post? You said it ended in December 2018, but when did it start?
Almost 2 years. It was February 17, 2017. Susan's blog post comes out. We get the checks for the lawsuit December 2018. I think the judge signed in November.
Wow. That is a long time to feel like crap.
And I mean, that it actually is short because we went through closed door mediation. We could have not done that and try to wait for the arbitration clause to try to break it. Like there's a Supreme Court portion of law that was trying to get passed. Like, I think it didn't get passed. So that also complicated things. Like there is a similar current lawsuit case of Kelly Ellis versus Google right now, where the judge just approved for the class action to move forward. The class is 10,000 engineers.
Oh my God.
That's been going on since 2017.
Wow.
Since early 2017, I believe the lawsuit got kicked off.
Oh, it's amazing how long these things can take.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on a lighter note, let's go back to Gremlin now. What's your favorite part about working there?
So there's a lot of things that I really enjoy about working at Gremlin, but I think a big portion of it is where I get to work on different projects and continue learning continuously. And a lot of it comes as being part of a startup where we get to do a lot of different roles, but at the same time, due to the nature of the job being around systems and cloud native technologies and working with a lot of technology stacks, you just kind of have to be a jack of all trades where you need to look at JavaScript code, go for it. You need to now go look at Go and Java. That's what you're going to do that day. Or all of a sudden, you now need to build a new infrastructure on a different cloud provider than what you're used to as your day-to-day. So it's being able to constantly learn. I think that really goes back to my roots where I'm like, I like tinkering. I like learning by myself. If a job allows for me to continue being myself and do the type of hobbies that I would have done 9 to 10 p.m., yeah, no, this is great. And then at the same time, I am a developer advocate. So I'm constantly working with the community, listening to other people share about failures and incidents and making systems better. But then we also get a chance to sit in with our customers where we get a chance to really be like, all right, what's your technology stack? What is the issues that you constantly have? And I think one of the nicest things is that we've seen a change within a lot of our customers where they're actually being proactive about reliability. Like they weren't tracking a lot of things prior, but as they've gotten the chance to see like, oh no, every single day is a high traffic event in the pandemic. How is it that we can make sure that we're staying above that? And then making sure that they're bringing in something like chaos engineering to then be like, all right, how can we be proactive every single month for the next year so that we don't relive that past outage we had when we launched that last product that costed us a lot of thousands of dollars or possibly millions. They didn't share exactly, they don't always share the cost of downtime, but sometimes you just kind of know it's really expensive and that they really don't want to do that again.
Yeah. Can you imagine going down on Black Friday or something? Bye-bye revenue. So what's one piece of advice you could give to men to help women feel welcome and comfortable going into tech?
I think there's two pieces of advice is always be willing to share your network. As you might have gone through the technology industry a lot earlier, or you have been in the industry for a longer time, being able to share your network and give referrals out or introduce minorities to other big players in the technology industry is going to help. And always be ready to share candidly about your salary and your compensation around how you have transitioned within your industry. It's really hard to be able to know what your worth is within the industry unless you're talking to other people. And having that conversation is hard. So with people you feel comfortable, you should be able to share, hey, I started out as a software engineer making $90,000 a year in 2010. Now I'm a staff software engineer, I'm making 250K. Being able to share those little details really helps people understand, oh, I'm actually currently a staff software engineer at another organization and they're paying me 120K. And we're still in the same type of region. Like, what's going on? How is it that I can start advocating for myself as a minority engineer in this space and get that mentorship of how do you have that conversation? I know for me, being able to negotiate is one of my biggest weaknesses. How is it that I can advocate for myself, have that confidence, and be able to say, I know my worth. If you don't know my worth, I'm walking away.
Yeah. It's always been kind of mind-blowing to me how, in context, I was born in Canada, so like a lot of my career was there, and it's just there's not that secrecy over there about salary as much as there is here. And it's always kind of been a little bit weird coming from a place that's so free, like talks about money, okay, and then you come here and then it's like there's all these, I don't know, like you're discouraged from talking about your pay here. It's just so odd to me. And it is really helpful when you have that baseline of knowing. It just, I don't know, it seems unfair. It's designed to make people
not make it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's what it comes down to. It's like, if you don't have the privilege, you're not going to be able to live in this capitalistic type of environment. It's hard. And it's like having that network, that back channel to be able to say, oh, can you tell me if this company is going to be healthy? What's the on-call culture like? How is a leadership team? Is it common for females to leave your organization? Is there ERGs that is going to help me? Are there career ladders that I can easily access within the first few months of my time at this organization? So really being able to be the ear on the ground and also be able to uplift and mentor those underrepresented folks coming into your organization is just completely key.
Yeah, actually, I kind of want to ask about this. I didn't plan for this, but you brought up mentorship just now. What do you think is a good way to reach out to people to try and get those mentorships?
So I think like the most genuine way for me is being able to have met you before and have a form of connection. So of course, if we're talking about pre-pandemic world, if you are running the same circles as me of coming up to a speaker, coming up to someone after a networking event and say, hey, your job title sounds really cool. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? It's intriguing. I am an undergrad going into my first year of professional life. And that kind of like helps break the ice. But when we're talking about a virtual world, it's like completely harder to make that first introduction. But I would actually say that you have a lot more ways to stand out. So like I talk about it in other forums where Twitter has been one of the best ways for me to grow my career. Coming from Miami, this is where I found my space. I was able to find internships via Twitter search. I was able to ask where are the Latina engineers within Bay Area and try to find my bubbles. And the same way is the way that I look at mentorship. If you find someone you admire within a social network like LinkedIn and Twitter that's in the professional setting, find ways that you can read things that they're doing, find talks, and really be able to say, like, what is the thought leadership that they're pushing? What are some of the things they're sharing or that they care about? So when you do that cold reach email, you're able to say, hey, I read your tutorial on chaos engineering on Kubernetes. I really love the way you explained this concept. Or I saw in your bio that you're Latina. I am also a Latina. I come from Mexico. What advice do you have for Latinas breaking into technology? So telling the person that you're asking to be mentor, hey, I read about you. I have an interest in your life. And by the way, it would be nice if you can talk to me for 15 minutes. So I think it's being able to be genuine about it and say, I just spent time and I admire your work. Is there any way that I can buy you coffee or just you chat with me for 15 minutes? Like that's going to make a little bit more of like my career trajectory a lot easier. And those are the things that we couldn't necessarily do in in-person events or in-person type of world where we always resorted to, I only mentor people in the Bay Area. I only mentor Latinos they're run in this certain type of group, those barriers are currently not existing in this virtual online world. So how is it that you can kind of stand out? And of course, if you can get a warm introduction, that usually helps. Of, hey, I see you're connected to so-and-so on your LinkedIn. I am just getting started. Would you mind like helping foster an introduction so I can understand what the career trajectory of them were and how can I get there too?
That's perfect. Let's see here. Is there anything exciting coming down the pipeline for you?
There's always something exciting going on. It's part of the type of job that I do. I get to always be breaking new stuff and learning about it, but nothing too big going on within my organizational work that I do. We are going to be launching a chaos engineering certification program. So if you keep an eye out within the Gremlin Twitter account, some new stuff is going to be coming very soon. There's also new episodes of the podcast I help co-host, Breaking Things on Purpose podcast. We'll have some cool new speakers coming up. And I get a chance to create content a lot. So there'll be a few new talks coming out in the next few months around testing, around continuous reliability, and really getting a chance to push forward a little bit of your chaos engineering practice. And yeah, that will be some new talks and some new tutorials or possibly videos. We shall see what creativity inspires Anna in the next few months.
If you can send me a link to the podcast, I will put it in this.
Perfect.
Awesome. And last question, is there anything else you would like to share? Perhaps a word of encouragement to women that are looking to start their career in tech?
I think the first advice that I got when I was coming into the technology industry was fake it till you make it. And I definitely did a portion of that, and it definitely helped with my imposter syndrome. But by doing that, I wasn't being genuine and bringing my whole self to work. And that later led to some form of burnout. So continuing to stay true to yourself and bringing your whole self wherever you are, because that leads to my next advice, where it's very much about you belong here and you're going to get pushed out. You're going to be told where you don't look like the normal type of person in this type of group that you're part of, because technology is currently not really representative of us. But you belong there, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You are going to make it. You're going to see that a lot of folks have done a lot of work in order for you to be able to be in that room. And with that is also being able to find a group that you feel comfortable in, find your community. For me, I resorted to finding communities of Latinx and Black folks in technology, places like Code 2040 and Tequeria, where they understood what it was like to be one of the only Black or Latinx engineers in an organization of 500 engineers, and what that actually entails. How do you bring up concerns to leadership? How do you form an employee resource group? How do you report something to HR? How do you tell your manager you're being racist? All those conversations are really hard to have, and being able to rely on other people that look like you, that come from the similar upbringing, that's really going to empower you to be able to stay in technology for a career versus this just being a hobby or this just being a stint you do for 1 or 2 years.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. This was a really great conversation.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I hope I gave you enough to be able to put this together, and that is not just me rambling about Uber being a terrible workspace and a lawsuit that came out of it.
No, this was perfect. Thank you.